Day in Black Baseball History. How's everybody doing today? Thought I'd get on early today and talk a little baseball. So some of you will probably catch this broadcast in its rerun. Just know that it's going to be tasty today, and it's going to have a lot of really good information related to the African American baseball history story. So I want to get started here. And of course, this is my March 7th, 2026 edition of This Day in Black Baseball History. And if you've been following me, I think I started like in July. I'm going to go back and check to see exactly when I started so I'll know when my anniversary date is for this first year. So if you like baseball and you really want a serious conversation about baseball, that's going to be a growing conversation, especially when the season starts. I'm going to do some different things this year. But certainly, I want to encourage you to join and continue to come back and listen to some of these broadcasts. All right. So I do have about 300 broadcasts that I have done, and that's including shorts since last July, and they are packed with information. So generally what I do is I have this day in Black baseball history, and then I use whatever happened on this day to have a broader conversation about Negro League baseball that comes from my 45 plus years of being a baseball historian on this topic. And that alone puts me in a class that few can dispute. And the thing is, there are some people who might say, hey, I've been out there that long. The truth of the matter is, I have the verification to prove that I've been working that long, right, in this history. Of course, I'm an award-winning author and a researcher, award-winning researcher, and just love history altogether. So without that further ado, and you probably know me if you've been joining, we're growing a network here, and we're heading towards 700 subscribers since July, when I think it's July. It's either June or July when I started. So we're heading toward the 700 subscribers. I have some pretty serious baseball folks that pop in and out, and they are always challenging me. And if I lay some information down and I'm not sure about it, they will respond. And then also they continue to send me emails afterwards to make sure that we're all on top of this situation. All right, so let me straighten out my jersey here. Okay, so let's go to immediately to March 7th, 1892. We're going to go way back. And manager William Bright of the Cuban Giants has signed William Billy White, and he spelled his name Whyte, and he was the skillful pitcher who was down in St. Augustine, Florida, and he's playing baseball down there. 1892. How about that? And you got black players going to Florida in 1892. So Bright said that he had scheduled White to be his opening day pitcher on April 17th. And Bright would go on to have many years as leader of the Cuban Giants, as well as White played many years with them. Now, it's interesting thing, in 1890, he had we're talking about White now, he had a very successful year with the York Monarchs. And many years ago, I went to York, Pennsylvania, and back in those days, we didn't have newspapers online. So if you wanted to get a little detailed information, you might have to pop up in that town. And I was there speaking through the public library, and Leon Day, I invited him down, and Leon Day was down there. Leon Day is now in the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York. Leon Day came down and spent the whole period I was there with me, and we did appearances, and people got a chance to get his autograph and have conversation with him. Leon Day, right? And so anyway, while I was there, I conducted research on the York Monarchs. I went to the library every morning and I pulled a lot of files, and then I made copies of those files and gave them to the librarian. So I had a copy for myself and I gave a copy to the librarian. I said, this is for anyone else who will come after me. And that's the kind of history that I was doing back then and helping everybody. So anyway, White has a great season there with the York Monarchs, and they were part of a minor league organization in that year. Now, what's interesting here is that White played for the Cuban Giants. Now, I've read something that said in 1886 that White played for the Kansas City Cowboys in the National League. I'm going to check that one out further because I don't think that I've ever read that there were any black players on the team. Now I don't know if he was passing for White or what, but they said he played 3 games. He played maybe how many games? They said he played 1 game and recorded 3 plate appearances, and then he was gone. So I'm interested. How did he get to Kansas City? And years ago, I wrote a book called The Kansas City Baseball Trivia Quiz. Thank you for those hearts, by the way. And if you're joining, let me know where you're joining from. That's always cool. So anyway, I'm going to dig into that a little further. I'm going to go back and read some of my own literature and dig into the Kansas City Cowboys. They were in the National League. And we used to have a trivia question around here in Kansas City. Did you know that Kansas City was a member of the National League? Of course, people think that Kansas City, of course, the Royals in the American League, and of course, the Athletics were in the American League. But most people didn't know that at one time, Kansas City was in the National League, right? Only for a season. They didn't do very good. Somebody said from Chillicothe, Missouri. Oh man, the thing about Chillicothe, uh, I'm trying to think of the catcher. He was a great catcher from Chillicothe. I'm trying to think of his name. He ended up in Omaha, and I presented in Chillicothe before. That is home of sliced bread. Can you believe they used to sell bread and they didn't slice it? But someone down in Chillicothe, Missouri, they're Vasco Graham. That's him. Yeah, great catcher with the Patriots Giants. Thank you very much for that. But yeah, home of the sliced bread, Chillicothe, Missouri. So next time I'm going to Chillicothe, maybe I'll buy a loaf of bread. All right. So anyway, yeah, good town, good baseball town. They had a woman there who wrote some fabulous things about Satchel Paige. Maybe I'll go back and dig that out and talk about that on a future broadcast. All right. Okay, so that's the story on William Bright and William Billy White. Okay. And let's go to this one. How about this one? There's an article in the March 7th, 1897 Boston Globe, and it said a first-class colored baseball catcher would like to hear from some crack team. And you can address 21 Globe office to reach him. So guys were out here trying to promote themselves. So teams were looking for players and players were looking for teams. So you will find these kind of advertisements often, people trying to get jobs, okay? All right, so let's go to March 7th, 1937. We made quite a jump here. The San Antonio Black Giants took both ends of a doubleheader from the San Antonio Black Sheepherders at San Antonio's Tech Field. Score was 6-3 and 7-4. The San Antonio Black Giants, and how about this? The San Antonio Black Sheepherders. Interesting thing about Oklahoma, there was a league called the Oklahoma Texas Louisiana League, started by Quincy Gilmore, I think 1929. And it was the first time that every team in the league had black in their name. So like they'd be the Tulsa Black Oilers or something like that. And so he had teams in Texas and Louisiana. I think Louisiana was, might have been Monroe Black Oilers, but they had different teams. But all of the teams, that was the first time that ever happened where all the teams had black in their name. Now, keep in mind when the Negro National League started in 1920, there were 3 teams that had Giants in their names and 2 teams that had Stars in their names. So they had the Cuban Stars and they had the Detroit Stars, but they also had the Chicago Giants, Chicago American Giants, and the St. Louis Giants. And if you listen to some of my broadcasts, I give the reason why they had so many of these giant names. And part of the reason was because it was an identifying factor for people who wanted to know which teams were black and which teams were white. So they began naming a lot of the black teams the Giants, right? And so if you saw somebody, say that the Memphis Giants or the St. Louis Giants or way out in the Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Giants, you could pretty much figure that those are African American teams, and so that Giant name became very associated with the Negro baseball leagues. Now, if you notice in some of my broadcasts, you go back and you'll see that I'm wearing a Giant uniform, right? Okay, so let's go to another one. Speaking of Giants, here we go. March 7, 1949, you might enjoy this one. The management mainly manager Charlie Dresson of the Oakland Seals of the Pacific Coast League AAA team signed pitcher Percy Fisher. Now, that's not a name that you will know right off the bat. And the team manager announced to his players that those who do not approve of playing with a Negro can quit right now. All right, that's 1949. He said he would sign more Negroes when he finds capable players. So Charlie was serious out there in 1949. He's going to change history, and he really did. And he ended up signing, well, he signed Fisher, who was 6'5", weighed about 200 pounds. So he was probably really massive out there on that mound, very intimidating. And so he signed him, and then he went on to sign Artie Wilson. I don't know if you know much about Artie Wilson, who led the Pacific Coast League in 1949 with a 348 average, 211 hits, and 47 stolen bases. Yeah. So he also signed Alonzo Perry, Ray Nobley, and he signed a guy that I had the honor of interviewing. I interviewed Wilson too, but which was Lorenzo Piper Davis. Yeah. And I do have pictures that Piper let me borrow that have him with the Oakland Oaks, the Oakland Seals, Oakland Oaks, whatever, uniform, right? And so that is very interesting, okay? And Fisher would make a single National League appearance for Cincinnati in April 16, 1955, made one appearance. He pitched two and a third inning, 2 2/3 innings in relief against the Milwaukee Braves, and he faced some legendary hitters like Joe Adcock and Bobby Thompson. You remember Bobby Thompson? That name, boy, that name ought to ring some bells in New York Giant history, right? Shot heard around the world. No, was that Bobby Thompson? Let's see. Where's that Dusty Rose? Somebody help me out real quick. I'm drawing a blank on which one it was, but hey, somebody hit the shot heard around the world, right? And that was in a playoff game. So let's go to the next one here. How about March 7th, 1954, pitcher Frank Rogan. Now keep in mind, there's only been one player who played. If you go get your baseball encyclopedia out, you go online, there's only one player who ever played professional baseball at the highest level with the last name of Rogan. But we almost had two. And this guy named Frank Rogan, age 19, from Gallatin, Tennessee. He was only, he was one of 16 players issued uniforms by the Southern Association Nashville Vols on this date in 1954, March 7, 1954. And he came to the team after receiving a tryout from the Brooklyn Dodgers at a camp there in Vero Beach, and that was in 1953. And so he will be the first of his race to wear a Vols uniform when he showed up in spring training. Now, things did not work out so good in Nashville. However, he ended up playing for the Nashville Stars, which was the black team locally there. And of course, they played quite a bit at the same park. But yeah, so he didn't get a chance to really develop into a talent there. So, but he ended up, I read further that he ended up playing with the Olean Oilers in the Class D affiliated in the Pony League in 1954. So he was able to put on the professional uniform, and but he's lost to history. His name was Frank Rogan. He was 19 years old. So how many ever heard of Frank Rogan? We know about Bullet Rogan, but how about Frank Rogan? And we got some people joining. Hey, by the way, if you like what's going on here, you like maybe more of this, you want more of this, go ahead and sign in. Somebody said South Carolina. Yep, hey, thank you. Somebody said Chicago. Well, man, Chicago is one of my favorite cities. Years ago, I used to go to Chicago, and I interviewed a number of players in Chicago that were alive at that time. Jimmy Crutchfield was one of them. Subby Bias was also alive at the time. I interviewed him. Who am I talking about? Double Duty Ratcliffe. Did I mention Double Duty Ratcliffe? Yeah. Shook Cornelius was alive. Jack Marshall, who was played with the, now there were two Jack Marshalls. I'm talking about the later Jack Marshall, who was also a professional bowler. And I've talked about him on some of these broadcasts before too. I need to go a little bit further because I know of three guys that were professional level bowlers. One of them would be Ted Page. Ted Page was with the Homestead Grays way back, and a couple of really good teams. Ted Page was a bowler. I interviewed Ted Page, and that's where I picked up all this information, because they love to talk about bowling and what was going on with bowling in the 1940s and the 50s, when it was becoming a massive sport. And so, yeah. And I'm trying to think of the last guy. He played with the Cleveland Buckeyes, so he was also a bowler as well. Actually, I have a picture of him actually bowling. I don't have one of Jack Marshall bowling, but hopefully I hope to find one someday, okay? So these guys were multifaceted athletes. So I just wanted to mention that, okay? So, and then also March 7th, 1991, I knew this guy very well. I wrote a full-page obituary for him in the St. Louis American newspaper. It's a black publication there in St. Louis. Full page, guys. You can get that. It's full. I mean, it's full page, and one of the longest newspaper articles I had ever written. I've written some long full-page articles for the Kansas City Call, but that was the first time outside of Kansas City. And so on that date, Hall of Fame player James Thomas Bell, Cool Papa Bell, died in St. Louis, Missouri, and I was so touched by that. And at that particular time, I had a lot going in my life. I was going back to school, and then I was raising family, 3 kids, and I couldn't get to his funeral. But the best thing I could do was to write that full-page article, and I still have that in my collection, yeah. A full-page article in James Cool Papa Bell, and I gave more details about this man's life than you had ever read anywhere else. And if you can get a copy of that article from the St. Louis American, and that was in 1991. And how many, look, think about this. How many of you guys are still around from 1991 who were involved in this history? And hey, I'm writing articles, full-page articles in 1991, but you got to keep in mind, I started in 1980, and I interviewed just a bunch of people. And I just thank God for giving me that inspiration to start that early, and to frame my life so that I realized these men were important. And that's how it all came to be, right? And so many people have jumped on the bandwagon since then, but just know there's still a lot of work to be done, and a lot of people to be highlighted, and a lot of history to be talked about. And I'm talking about some of it here. So James Cool Papa Bell, I don't know how many people here had a chance to meet him, but he was a fabulous man. And if you would have loved to have met him, if you could have. But I am happy to have met him, known his wife very well. And if you used to go down to St. Louis back in the 80s, I think I met him first around maybe 1984, somewhere like that. He had on his coffee table, he had pictures of my children on his table. My son, my daughter, at that time were on his coffee table. So you went to his house, you know, people probably said, who are they? And he probably said, well, it's Phil Dixon, the historian's kid. So yeah, so I really appreciate them. They were great people. Man, without people like that, it's no way I would be where I am today. These people they carried me, is what they did. And I am so blessed to have known them and to be able to talk about them. And I can't let their memory die, right? And so that was James Cool Papa Bell. And his wife was Clara Bell, yeah. And she was a nice lady, and we would go down and we talk all the time. She had great stories too. Most people talk about his stories, but man, her stories were, she had a different version of the story. She saw some things that he didn't, and then some of the things she saw different than he did. So I always liked talking to both of them. And I would go down there on a Saturday afternoon and drive from Kansas City and get there about maybe 9 or 10 in the morning. And then I'd be there till 4 or 5 o'clock. We watch TV and we talk baseball. I bring some pictures down, and he look at the pictures and identify people, and he tell a story. As a matter of fact, I have a picture right here. Let me get it. This is a guy right here. You can't see it, but his name is Cheney White. And most of the things I learned about Cheney White came from Cool Papa Bell. And I use this picture right here in my book, The Negro Baseball Leagues, A Photographic History of Cheney White. Cheney White is sitting on a fence there with a pretty fancy hat on. But guess what? he played with Coop Papa Bell, and Coop was able to tell me intimate details about these ball players, right? So, all right then. So, yeah, James Coop Papa Bell. So, I do have one more, and then I'm going to be out of here, but I do appreciate you guys for being with me today. And so, once again, I'm growing my network. So, guys, if you want to share the broadcast, by all means do that. And Paul Julian's on here. Paul, I think you caught me 2 days in a row. That's amazing there. Caught 2 days in a row of a live broadcast. You probably missed a little bit of it, but just you can go back. Just know there's some people on here. I think the people who are working with bringing Vasco Graham's history to life, they're on here. Somebody's on here. And people from Chicago are on here. I did see South Carolina. I'm trying to think. I've been to South Carolina. I'm trying to think where I was at in South Carolina. I think I'm trying to think. I have to think about South Carolina because I've been to North. I know in North Carolina. I know I've been there. I was just there in Rocky Mount last year in Buck Leonard's hometown, Rocky Mount, North Carolina, which is also the home, if you're a jazz person, of the Thelonious Monk. Is also from the same hometown as Buck Leonard. Now, who's most famous, Buck Leonard or Thelonious Monk? Well, I'll tell you what, they both really made an impact on their profession, right? So anyway, I'm trying to think South Carolina. Oh man, wow. I am trying to think. I have to think about that one. I'm gonna have to look at the map and see where I've been in South Carolina. Now you got me thinking, guys. In 40 some odd years, if you can imagine the places I've been. And a couple of years ago, I conducted a 200 city tour, and that was 200 different cities, and it took me 4 years to complete the tour. And man, I was everywhere. Covered 17 states and went to Canada, and I drove all of it, right? So you can just imagine that tour, trying to remember all those cities. I didn't get to Carolina on that one. I think I got down south, down to Mississippi on that one. I got up north, a lot of up north, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska. Of course, I was all over Missouri, down in Arkansas. Didn't quite get to South Carolina, but there's a lot of good history in South Carolina. So I'm gonna have to dig some of that up. And guys, keep staying with me, and I'll make sure that I get that. I'm gonna go when I get off this broadcast to do some research on that. So my last feed of the day is about a guy who's playing right now, and he was born on March 7th, 2001. So we just went from old guys to new guys. So this is somebody you can see play right now. His name is Michael Harris II. He was born in DeKalb County, Georgia. And he lived so close to the Braves Stadium that he could hear them cheering. And I can relate to that because I live so close to the old municipal stadium that especially in football games, baseball games, the A's were there, didn't hear much. But when football was there, the Chiefs, I could actually lay in my room or come out on the front porch and I could hear people cheering. So I can relate to that. Yeah. So his 3-year rise from Stockdale High School to the major leagues is the subject of a documentary, and it's called Michael Harris II, The Dream and the Journey. So you can look that up, that documentary, and this is something that's pretty current right now. And through his first 4 seasons, and he's getting ready to go into that 5th season in 2026, he's recorded 539 hits, 73 home runs, 70 stolen bases in 522 games. So keep watching his progress. And guys, these ball players are part of a legacy that goes way back to William Billy White. So guys, all right, I think my throat is getting scratchy. I probably covered enough information here today. Do want to thank everybody for joining. And Paul, Julia, I'm glad you caught me after all this time. So I just appreciate you following. Paul is a great young historian, and so you want to follow his work as well. And then also they're working on this project with Vasco Graham, the great legendary catcher of several teams, ended up in Omaha, but most people might know him from the Page Finch Giants. So you want to follow that as well. So thank you guys. I'm on my way to see documentary shorts today, so we can see who's going to win an Academy. So I'm going to look at some short films today at a program here in Kansas City. So I just want to chime out for now. Hey, if things go well and I get a chance to come back, I'll come back tonight. We're pushing toward that 700 subscribers, and every time I come on, we pick up a few more subscribers. So thank you guys. I look forward to seeing you soon. Have a nice day. This is Phil Dixon with another edition of This Day in Black Baseball History.